Reji, thanks for coming.
Jeff, thanks for having me.
Now, do we want to call you Reji, or do you want me to call you by your other name?
That's a really good point. You should actually just call me Red.
Red, but what's...
Jerry
Red
is what
Shepherd.
I'm more... Jerry Red Shepherd is like the full... Yeah, that's the one it is these days. I'm sure we'll get into pen names and talk about my many, many names.
Yeah, I was going to say...
It's just why I go by Red, so...
We're getting ahead of ourselves. Well, I did that. So we've known each other for quite some time, haven't we?
We have.
What year was that? I can't remember.
It was actually 2018 that we first met. And I brought Knowing Worth because that's the first time I met you.
And tell them what happened.
Yeah. You sucked. So you were working in the real estate brokerage with my sister, who was your team leader at the time. And she wanted to give a gift to all of the, like, her best producers and the people that she, was really pouring into at Keller Williams. And so she put together this book, Knowing Worth, where everybody got to, like, share their stories.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, okay, so just before, because I don't think people know you yet and why you're here. So, which we will get in the book, I promise, and we'll finish the story. So Reji, why I wanted her on is because she's a book writer at heart, but she's done a lot more than that, which we'll dive into. But she's gone through a lot of different, like, transitions. I don't know if you want to say struggles, but more like you've had to really overcome a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, every time I'm multi-genre, and I brought a few of my books to kind of demonstrate that. But when you're as an author, first of all, authors are small business owners. We're entrepreneurs. We run into the same stuff that you're running into all the time in owning your own business. Mm-hmm. But every time that you change genres, and I do that a lot, you're basically starting your business completely over.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
So now that we established book writer, that's why she's talking about books, and there's a whole big stack here. Okay, so
it was a whole thing. So
sister wanted to do something for the top producers.
Yeah. So our very first session, we're just like, all this was like, hey, this is what's going to be going on over the next 6 months while I teach you guys how to tell your stories and how to use them in a way to grow your businesses at the same time. Jeff is the only person in that room who got up and walked out. And that was my introduction to Jeff.
That's how we met.
That's how we met. And I was like, dang, I guess he's just too good for this.
Everybody had such good stories. And I'm like, now what am I going to do?
I could have done this. Please, you could have done it.
Yeah, I think I should have used you to, because you were like, hey, like, if you guys need help and blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. I'm like, well, shit, like.
Some really good stories.
I'm going to use her time, and she's be like, no, you can't be in the book because you have nothing.
Stop. And honestly, it was a really cool experience. And then we ended up working together several years later, mm-hmm. and he had totally forgotten who I was. And I reminded him that he was the one person who walked out of the room. He didn't want to write with me then.
You were, well, first let's talk, like, before that, you had your own editing company, didn't?
Writing
called
and
Clippy?
Publishing services. So what? Called what?
Clippy? Do you remember Clippy from, like, Microsoft Word?
I hated that stupid thing, and it would always pop up right in front of where you're actually trying to do work. And you're like, go away. I can't actually see the thing I'm working on. No.
That was my one book writing joke. So that's all I have.
That's it. That's your whole thing.
That's it.
Stop. Yeah. So no, oh my gosh. I've had a lot of companies. I write under a lot of names, but it was, for a while, it was Reji Laberje Writing and Publishing. I had Bucket List to Bookshelf. That was, how to go from the idea in your head to the book on the shelf and beyond, the marketing of it. And so,
I thought there was one company that you had that you actually hired people, but you went
that was Reji Laberje Writing and Publishing.
Nothing, right? Yeah.
Well, that was actually like by the time I had opened my publishing company in 2014, my first publishing company I had from 2014 to 2017, and I sold it to one of my publishing designers. And that was Reji Laberje Writing and Publishing. We did author programs for schools. We did writing for other people's stories.
Mm-hmm.
So like, somebody like you're like, hey, I know how to, run a real estate company. I would like to teach that knowledge to people. And that's kind of the stuff that we would do is we would work with people. But by the time that I had started that, I had already had, I don't know, a decent number of my own books out. I had been writing for kids' books and
which you have one, I think.
Right? I do. I have one of my kids' books here. That's my one of my board books. This one is crazy because each of these, there are 6 in this series. They took me about 3 hours a piece to write. Maybe an hour of research too, because they're all cities that I've been to. And there are about 450,000 maxes in the world.
Really?
All around the country, all different formats.
Actually,
schools,
I should buy
PDFs
one of these from you.
Yeah.
Because of my niece and nephew would be perfect for it.
Yes, you should. You should definitely buy those from me.
That's a good idea. Because I could actually go and be like, oh, I know the author of this book.
I'm so special.
I know. So what, with that company,
mm-hmm.
I remember it was tough for you, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You're working long hours.
I went
making sure that your employees were taken care of before yourself.
Always. So again, I owned that company 2014 to 2017. And first of all, I ridiculously undercharged. Like unbelievable. Like the entire process of we will literally write your book for you, publish it, distribute it, market it, and we are going to be your voice partner for about a year in each case, depending if it's a shorter book, maybe a little less. And that was costing people $4,000 to $6,000.
Holy shit.
And I had people to pay, and I had set up stuff to pay, and designers to pay. And so I went, during the course of owning that company, I went about 42 months with 0 paycheck, 80-hour weeks. And I remember one book, I won't admit which one it is, by the way. There was one book, it was like literal sleep writing. I remember I had such terrible carpal tunnel that as I was typing, I was crying from the pain. Like it was like I was in physical pain and I was so tired that my eyes were closed. And I was literally writing the book like this with tears rolling down my face and my eyes closed because I couldn't physically open them up anymore.
That is wild.
It was crazy.
So I know you've within that, I don't know if it's that company, but you talk about, which you wanted to make sure I said, not ghostwriting.
Yeah.
So it's ghostwriting and
so I did co-writing.
Co-writing. And the difference between the two are.
Yeah. So this was I brought my first and my last co-writes here with me just to kind of like talk about that a little bit. So my first ever co-write was with Dick Vitale, the big ESPN commentator for NCAA. And what I thought was going to be my last co-write was with Steve Palick. This one actually went to #1, who's a big DJ personality in the Milwaukee area.
When you say *1, what do you mean by how do you qualify for #1?
So I have 15 different #1s, and I consider it a #1. So basically, these are not New York Times #1s. I do have 1 or 2 that have gone to a USA Today bestsellers list #1, but most of my #1s, they're a top category on Amazon #1. Okay. So in this one, it was like sports biographies that it landed at like a #1 overall sports biography on Amazon. So, but this is actually the getting a W was my very first co-write. And the thing is when people grow up, and I literally started writing from the time I could hold a pencil. I was writing from 4 years old. When you're growing up and you're like, I want to be a writer, nobody's like, I want to write other people's stories. No, you want to write your own stories. And so I'd had 3 of my books out by this point. I had a chapter book, a young adult book, and a picture book out, none of which I brought with me. And I had those 3 out, and I ended up going independent with those ones back when it was called Vanity, which ugly word, by the way. It's just like ridiculous. It's like, oh, you bust ass really hard to get this out. And so therefore we're going to call it Vanity. It's just ridiculous. So I had these 3 books out, and I was at a big book convention. It's called Book Expo America. They hold it in New York. And I was working on getting distribution for those.
Okay.
Ended up stranded in LaGuardia. If you've ever flown out of LaGuardia, you're always stranded in LaGuardia. So I was stranded in LaGuardia coming home, but I had such a really good convention, like made such great contacts and networking that I was just in a ridiculously good mood.
And this was the Dick
one.
Vitale.
So
okay.
I'm in this crazy good mood. People are sleeping. I'm, by the way, sitting nowhere near my terminal because there were no seats by my actual terminal. I'm not flying out for hours and hours. And we get into these conversations where everybody's like, what were you here for? And blah, blah, blah. And there's this girl. And I don't know. I kind of do this in my circles. I sort of become the leader, the little community organizer. And there was this girl who was 18, who was just bawling. She couldn't make it home. She was going to her prom, meeting her boyfriend. I went to the Dunkin' Donuts, the only place open, and I had them make a donut cake for her.
Shut up.
And I brought it. I had the whole group around us sing happy birthday to this girl. And like, it was just, I was having a great time. And all this time, this one older guy who's over here, I actually thought he was fast asleep.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as people started getting into those conversations of, what are you doing here? And I was like, oh, I just got back from Book Expo America and blah, blah, blah. And this guy who I think is asleep the whole time sits up and he's like, hey, got a card? And it turns out that he was the president of this publishing company.
No shit.
So ended up, I will condense, long story short, it was about 11 months of back and forth of like me sending samples, me and all this, where he ultimately ended up hiring me for this job. And I didn't even know that he was considering. I thought he was telling me about this project. He's like, oh, I was here looking for an author for Dick Vitale.
Wait, so you're saying the guy sleeping was Dick Vitale?
No, it was his publisher.
So
I did ultimately end up meeting Dick. This actually ended up being the first of like
I
5 books we worked on together.
For like ever.
No, I was just picked up. And then I did end up doing like 5 books with him.
Okay.
So we did this one, and then in other roles I ended up publishing. But what that did is it opened up. They partnered with me because he was writing this one for youth. And he'd never written ones for youth. And I had all these books out for young people. And what's funny is when I got home, I didn't even know that this guy, when he asked for my card and he told me what he was doing, I didn't even know he was looking at me. And like after a couple of weeks of communications, he's like, well, do you want the job or not? And I was like, oh, I didn't know you were asking me. Yeah. And so what's funny is about that convention is every other great lead I had when I left there fell through. Every single thing that when I was on and selling myself at this convention it turned out to be garbage. This meet, which was kind of like my break, because from here, like everything in my career built up. And I think this was 2011. And when that happened, it was just because I was busted being myself. It wasn't when I was like when I was selling myself at the convention. It was like when I was just exuding good energy. That's when it happened. And that opened the door for, people will actually pay me to write their story because they have a great story, but maybe they don't have the gift of writing.
So how do you write somebody's story if you don't know them? That's like, and then it comes off as it was from him. Like, how do you do that? Yeah,
you're going to read that and you're going to say, oh my gosh, this is all Dick's words, you know? So first of all, just to kind of double back, the co-writing piece means that I'm telling your story, but you're using my gift of writing. So if I'm writing for you, Jeff, what I'm going to do is we're going to sit down and I'm going to interview the hell out of you for a while. Like we're going to have several many hour long sessions. I'm talking to you about what you want to do. And what I do is I'm able to like puzzle that together. I'm able to kind of like go, these are how the pieces of your life fit together into a story that somebody wants to consume. Or in some cases, like there's lessons that need to be taught. So maybe here's like an acronym and a word model that might be like what you want to teach for your business. So in that time that I'm with you, I'm going to learn how to adopt your voice. You're going to read like these 2 books, and Steve Palick sounds like Steve Palick, and Leroy Butler, who's in this, sounds like Leroy Butler, and Dick Vitale sounds like Dick Vitale. They don't sound like me. Yeah. I'm taking their story and I'm learning how to puzzle it and construct it and tell it in their voice. And it's really, I always tell people that by the time, especially if I'm doing like an autobiography or a biography with you, or if I'm, anything that includes like personal stories or stories from your youth, I will know you better than your spouse or parents by the end of that process.
That's pretty wild. So, okay. So in a lot of people's businesses, we'll take mine, for instance, when I'm sitting down with sellers, selling is not telling. It's actually asking good questions to understand their wants, needs, goals, and whatever. And then that's how you close it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in the same case, you still have to ask good questions to get to know somebody. If you could pick, like, I mean, I bet you ask them hundreds of questions, but if there was one good question that you would ask them to really get to know somebody, or at least get them to open up, what is that question?
So I have a secret power that every single person I've ever written with, I make cry at some point. So honestly, good old Simon Sinek, just getting at that, what's your why? Mm-hmm. And so I really like to dig into that, but I go way back because of the types of stories I tell. I want to hear, I will sometimes literally just sit down and I'll be like, tell me a story from your childhood. And I want to go that far back. I'm like a psychologist.
See, I love that.
It's therapeutic writing.
After this, can we try and make Sarush cry?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Yeah, see if we can get him to cry. It'd be great. I would love to see it. Are you an ugly crier or a? Yeah.
Oh, he's a pretty crier. Yeah. One beautiful tear leaves a streak.
Okay. Wow. So you go.
I do.
You go deep.
I go deep. And then I here's the thing, it's conversations. And part of this is like, just from a logistical, technical perspective, I can look at you and never lose contact and type. And I just, and even though we have, I used to use recording devices, or now there are like AI note takers and stuff like that. But I'm going to have just a conversation with you and you're going to forget. And I'm going to be like your friend / your mother / your therapist. And I'm just conversing with you and typing away and taking my own notes. And as I'm doing it, I'm actually writing the story in my head at the same time. So I might be talking to you about, we've had this story. Mm-hmm. You told me about hiding behind the garage. You didn't want to see people to see you making your first calls and getting no's and feeling that. And in my head, I might be typing what you're saying, but I'm also typing other things. I'm typing emotional things. I'm typing, things that would work well in a story. The deeper we get into a story, I have a couple that I don't have here. I wrote with a guy who was on extreme weight loss. He was the all-time loser of weight on every season of extreme weight loss. And I went and I did his workout with him because I was like, I need to feel it. Mm-hmm. I need to know what this feels like. I'm going to write it. And so like, if I'm working with you and you're talking about doing calls, when I was working with Steve Palick, I sat in the studio with him when he DJ'd. If I were working with you, I would sit there and literally listen to your phone calls. So I'll be like, hey, I'm going to write while you're doing your cold calling today.
You'd be bored all day.
No, but I'm picking up on things that are different. So yeah, and that's kind of like the co-writing is it's really, I'm your writer. You're the story.
Yeah.
Whereas with ghostwriting, it's not, you're not putting your name on the book if you're ghostwriting. So it's really hard to market yourself if you're continuing.
Oh, there it is.
Yep.
It's right there. It is. Right.
And B, so just from a business perspective, it's like, if my name's not on the book, how am I supposed to say, hey, I wrote this?
Do you have the first one?
At Fault? Yeah. Yeah, you were a beta reader on that one.
I'm in it. Like the back. The contribution, because I beta readed. So like I read the book before it came out. I gave notes and stuff. And then it's,
Yeah.
I'm very special.
I think he still has to read book 2, by the way.
I know. Well, you're on book 3, aren't you? Or 4?
3 is out. The series will be finished next year. Yeah.
Wait, what? Oh.
See, we're going like that. We got to see those labels out there. And let's flip our.
No, I know. I don't want to get ahead of myself because there's a lot that we could talk about. But I also wanted to, because I feel like I suck at telling stories. So when you're telling, not writing, okay, but I feel like that kind of are together on that, right? Okay. So if you were to teach somebody to like explain or tell a good story, how do you do it?
So I think there's this interesting, I love neuroscience. I
think that's why we connect so well, is because we love how the brain works.
Yes. And I think that something that people don't understand is that our brains, you have white matter and you have gray matter. And white matter is like, these are the parts of your brain that are segmented. Like, this is your math is over here and it's in this section. And this is a language and your language is here. And actually each language has a different section in your brain, but it's not connected. But gray matter is connective. And when we tell stories, it actually like lights up the gray matter in our brain. And it actually makes our different parts of our brain connect, and it makes us connect with one another. And so the power of story is so important. And so what I tell people is, I'm like, okay, let's get to like the heart of the story, kind of like the Simon Sinek, let's get to why, what is your why? Well, the same with story. And I remember on Knowing Worth, there's one of my favorite all-time stories I've ever told, had the joy to help tell, was Brad Parent's story in that book. And I remember sitting in the room with all of the other people, and I'm like, hey, tell me the story. And people are going about it in the newspaper manner, like the who, what, when, where, why, how, right? And I'm like, you're describing something that you think that we understand what you're saying. Mm-hmm. He's like, oh, well, I went up to Canada, fishing. I was like, wow, I've never fished in Canada. What is it like up there? Tell me about that. Tell me about the drive. What do you see on the drive? What is that experience like? And really, it's just question and question and question and question. And each question digs deeper. And so I usually try to say, when you're telling a story, yes, there's the who, what, when, where, why, how, but then let's dig into the senses. What are you seeing? What are you hearing, tasting, smelling, touching? Touching, by the way, not just our fingers, but like, how does the air feel? How do your feet feel on the ground beneath you? Is there a breeze going on? Like all of these different things that are experiencing something. First, you got to bring in those senses. And then you actually need to look into what I call the TFIs, which are your thoughts, feelings, and imaginings. And while you're experiencing that cool breeze, what are you imagining? Are you brought back to childhood when you used to go sledding? Like what are you feeling? Does that make you excited? Does that make you scared? What are you thinking? Are you thinking about, man, I really wish that I could bring my kids out sledding again. Our life is too busy right now. So yes, you're looking at those WH questions, but then you're looking at your senses, but then you're looking at your TFIs.
No, you said imagining.
Yeah.
Like what was that the example of imagining?
Nostalgia.
The kids?
Like when remembering back to nostalgia kind of falls into imagination a little bit. Okay. And so when you're getting those, you're actually going beyond just the what. You're pulling somebody into the experience. Now, to take that a little bit further to like where you're at with your real estate, and when you're making calls, if you have all of those elements of a story, you have the WHs, you have the 5 senses, and you have the TFIs, then you're going to put that into presenting mode. And what I mean by that is when we present, every human being, let's light up that gray tissue. Mm-hmm. Let's get into the 5 ways that we connect. We're going to connect through the head, the heart, the gut, the hands, the feet, which means we're going to connect through logic. We're going to connect through emotion. We're going to connect through instinct. We're going to connect through want and desire, and we're going to connect through drive. Okay. Head, heart, gut, feet, hands. If you're speaking to somebody who's like a hardcore businessman and that's how they operate, you're going to look at those WHs, you're going to look at those senses, you're going to look at those TFIs, and you're going to go, you know how I'm going to talk to this guy? I'm going to talk to the guy about the head things, the logic things that are in this presentation. You're maybe connecting with somebody who's moving on from a home that they've been in for 30 years. You are going to be talking to them about heart things that are in those different breakdowns. If you're talking to somebody who's like maybe an investor and they're like really driven, you're going to talk about instinct and drive.
What about analytical? Is that also?
Analytical is kind of a head thing.
Okay.
So if you know with each story to really fully round out that experience of a story, and pull somebody in, you're going to have the senses and the WHs and the TFIs. But then when I'm communicating with each person in that story, I'm going to pick the best way to connect with them. And different people have different balances of what they'll need to hear. But you need to know all the pieces.
I think the ones I struggle with the most is the like more of an introverted person. So how you connect with somebody when it's hard to get any kind of feel for them.
I think that if you start at that sensory experience, you're going to be able to nail with them what it is that they're seeking. So if you can talk about the home and say, oh, well, tell me about your current home and what do you love about it and all this. And you're going to listen. Again, you and I both know when we're entrepreneurs, you have to be listeners above all else. And so you're going to listen, and that thing that maybe they open up a little bit more, maybe they tell you a little bit more about, maybe they're going to tell you about, yeah, no, I really like that I've got this door frame where we measure everybody's heights. And you're like, boom, I'm in. I know that what's important to them is emotion and nostalgia. So I'm going to look at my TFIs. I'm going to talk about some of that imagination stuff. And I'm going to look at, as far as how I present it, I'm going to look at those things that are emotional. That's what I'm hitting on for that next home. Oh my gosh, this new home, did you see that it's got this beautiful riverfront? Can you imagine seeing your kids play around and dig up their own worms from there to go fishing? Why? Because you know that that's the piece that was important.
Okay, so driver, well, how would you connect it with a driver in that instance right there?
So a driver is going to be like your feet. So that's going to be like, this is going to be like, wow, you need this now, you need this fast. Like, oh my gosh, that home is going to go so fast because people are going to see that they love that it is, across from this unbuildable area, and they're going to know that they're going to get that forever. Like, so, but it's some of that is like in your linguistic choices and how you communicate with them. You're going to like, this is going to go so fast. And oh my gosh, you are going to be so lucky if you're the guy who gets this. And holy cow, whoever gets that, they are going to have a property that's either going to be an investment for them for years or they're going to be leaving something for their kids.
This is why storytelling, I'm not even kidding you, is like, it's
so important.
It's so important. When people, for like in sales, like they always think that they have to have this like good rebuttal, that there's this one phrase that if you say this one phrase, it's always going to get them to say yes and sign paperwork with you or whatever. And it's like, no, it's not.
Well, and a lot of times that's a question that people, their red flags go up. They're like, oh, I'm being sold. Nobody likes to feel like they're being sold.
I quit smoking again, by the way.
I'm good for you.
Yeah.
I was so mad that you started.
Yeah. And
I'm glad that you stopped again.
Well, then
did I give you a hard enough time? Did I help with that a little bit?
You made me a fake pack of cigarettes with like notes on encouragement.
I did. I did. Every little, they were all little rolled up like white notes, like rolled up like cigarettes. But on each one, I put a reason for why you want to quit smoking. Right. So he'd unroll one and be like,
she's always for me.
This is, my wife was a reason. And, it was like, because I want to be around longer for, my job. I want to reach that goal and my health. And I'm tired of like having yellow teeth. And
there you go. Like, so you touch a story on it. Again, the emotional side of things.
Right?
There's a perfect time for a sponsor, Zyn, to quit smoking. Sponsor me. Do it.
Do it.
Do it.
So,
only kidding.
Not really. He's not kidding.
No, I'm not kidding. Sponsor me, please. Okay, so you obviously, the majority in the beginning, kids' books, some teenage.
Oh, yeah. So, okay, are you wanting
writing for others? But now I wanted to talk about this.
Yeah.
Because you were basically like, screw it, I'm doing the book I want to do.
Yeah.
Which is, I'll let you say
So it's really interesting. So yeah, my transition, I actually, like I say, I've written from the time I was literally 4. I was first published at like 9. So like it was poetry, plays, moved to kids' books, which pulled me into the co-writing. The co-writing paid the bills for like a decade. So it was like, oh, this is what you're doing. But what happened is, I won't say which book, but there was a book where I was at the release event, and one of the people that was very important to the person for whom I wrote showed up at this release event, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's so good to finally meet you. I'm glad you were able to make it out for the release event. I know it means a lot to this person I wrote with. And this person says to me, and who are you again? And I'm like, oh, I'm Reji Laberje. That's the name I use for writing under my, for doing my co-writing. And he's like, and how do you know my parent? Mm-hmm. And I was like, wow, I know this person probably better than you at this point, and literally, and it was just like a dagger. It was like, so I was like, I'm so done with co-writing. And that was like 2019. And so, of course, we didn't know that what was going to be coming, and like, several years later, and or several months later, and I was like, I'm in the pandemic. I'm like, I'm not writing anymore, period. Mm-hmm. And I started to read again, which I know this sounds stupid, but I hadn't read just for pleasure. Like, as opposed to research, I hadn't read for pleasure in like probably 15 years, And I read James S.A. Corey's The Expanse, which is a series I turned you on to.
Yep.
And I was
read 3 of those.
Sci-fi. I'm like, this is what I loved growing up. I'm like,
that's one thing that how I got lucky enough to be a beta reader was because finding out that you actually liked the sci-fi books.
You were like a nerd like me.
I loved the Ender Game series. It's probably one of my favorite series. So At Fault is what you decided to write.
So I decided to write this. It's the Broken Fault Line series.
We don't want to give too much away, but in a nutshell.
It's a globally diverse ensemble of characters walks you through the world of Earth after the melt. It is hard sci-fi, meaning it's actually it's futuristic, but it's like based in real science as opposed to sci-fantasy. And
like Star Trek.
Yeah. I mean, beam me up. Let's be honest. It's fantasy. It's great. Don't get me wrong. I'm a diehard Trekkie, right? But I actually had like 6 niche experts, like engineers, physicists, disaster recovery specialists who helped inform.
I was going to say, because I remember reading that and some of the science part of it, I was like, she had to do some extensive research.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Those are like the hardest parts to write too. But I also, because I'm not the person, like if I'm reading the description of a book and you're like, I'm sorry, I got to go set off a nuke at the core of the earth to stop it from you know what show I'm talking about, y'all. But yeah, I'm like, no, I'm out. I'm out. So, but I'm really enjoying it. But because it was a totally different genre, I had been writing kids' books. I had been writing biography stuff that's very general audience friendly. This is not. This is, I would say, like maybe NC-17. So I had to change the name I was writing under for that so that I didn't want somebody who was like reading Max to go, oh, we like this author. Yeah. Let's check out her really dark graphic sci-fi.
Oh, man, it was so much fun reading that and just getting to like know a part. Because, I mean, you're reading, you basically writing it and you're like, holy shit, she had that in her to like write that? It was like, dang. People who read it will understand. So I remember at the release, you were disappointed by the online sales.
Oh, what a different market. Holy crap. And it's doing really great now.
Yeah.
But so for years and years, working in the nonfiction world, I was like, I know how to do this. Like, I have made so many number ones. I have made great sales. I know what I'm doing. And I applied all of those same tactics and more to the release for this. And it was by no small investment. You
even made a trailer for it.
I had a trailer. It played in movie theaters. I had actors. I had, in addition to all of the things that I'd always done for nonfiction books, like building grassroots movements and really driving for that first day sales. Here's the thing about books. They are, if I'm writing nonfiction, I can grab this book. I can be like, hey, what's this book about? Oh, that's what this book is about. I know what I want to learn. I'm going to go into this book. This is what I'm going to learn. Fiction. That's what this book is about. What is it about? It's about the cover. That whole nobody judges a book by its cover, that's BS. Everybody judges a book by its cover. And they should, because your cover should, I actually had to change the cover. The one you have is the original cover, which was super arty and like, just like all my great nonfiction covers. Didn't sell because somebody couldn't look at it and go, this is what this book is about. And so we were at the release party, and you have to wait like a couple of days for all the numbers to come in because, and I had sold 83 books. So I had been working on it for about 18 months. Some of that was building the whole world for the future books too, but I'd been working on it for about 18 months, which was a long time for me to do a book. And poured in $10,000 worth of marketing investment on it, and production investment, and 83 books. So that was, I don't know, like around $500 or something. I was like, ooh, I'm in trouble. But then I had a show, like a Comic-Con style show, on the calendar. And I'm like, well, I guess I've already paid for this show. I may as well go and maybe I'll recoup a little bit. And I had a couple cases of the book and I sold out. And I was like, oh, this is a different market.
Yeah, that's where you found your thing. And that's where you like took off.
Yeah.
Not just with the book sales, but you've made a ton of connections, which is really cool.
Yeah.
But before we go into that, because that's also in the nerdy world is like super exciting in my opinion.
It is.
Obviously every time that you did one, you basically sold out all your books, but you busted your ass. And it reminds me of the chick who wrote, I don't even know her name. And I should, J.J.R. Tolkien, whatever her name is.
J.K. Rowling?
Yeah, thank you, J.K. Rowling.
He was mixing her up with J.R.R. Tolkien.
Why are they
Lord
all,
of the Rings?
Why are they all, well, you're J.R.
I'm Jerry, yes. Jerry Red Shepherd.
Yeah, JJRS.
JR.
See, they're all the same. I'm kidding.
Right.
Kidding. But her story, right? I think everybody freaking knows it, where she had to go and got rejected like a million times, and then finally, and now she's this billionaire. I don't even know. Is she a billionaire? I don't even know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you did the same thing where you did show like every weekend in different states. How many shows did you do?
So that first year, so the book came out in April, and I had a show like the last weekend of April, first weekend of May that year. And that year I was like, oh, this is what I have to do. So I think I did like 20 some shows that year. The next year I did it was like 37 and then 41. And now actually this coming year, I've dialed way, way, way back. And so in doing that, that was kind of my test and measure phase of like, what shows do my books do well at? What books should I carry? Because I've got 124 books out now, but nobody's buying Knowing Worth and Dickie V at these shows. You know, most of these shows are like, oh, sports ball. I happen to be a sports fan. Most of the people going to these events are not sports fans.
They're more Comic-Con, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, and actually, so I have a mix of Comic-Cons and game conventions are the two. So like next year I'm doing 12 shows, but I've gotten to the point where every show I'm doing, I'm a guest at. So usually like some portion of my business is covered. Like my booth is covered. Sometimes my stay is covered. I'm running the programs there. So I've got 12 ridiculously powerful shows instead of like 40 average shows.
Yeah. Which is actually kind of genius if you think about it. Because if you're a guest, you're like you're advertised as the expert. And then at the same time, you get benefits of the free booth and stuff like that. So you get
a lot of sweat equity for that. But I definitely.
It wasn't like it was just like overnight.
It
took you some time with some of those connections and stuff. Which one was your best show?
Best ever? Okay, so there are two answers to this. One, my first year that I did Origins, which is a big game convention in Ohio, that was my best ever selling show. So I had sold just short of $5,000, which books are like $20 a piece. So that's a lot of sales. Huge. We're not selling a game where it's a couple hundred a piece. I think anybody would be happy to make
5,000 over a weekend.
But that particular one at that time, because that was before I was guesting there, was a really expensive show. Mm-hmm. So my net from that show was not really high. My repeating success show is Gary Kahn in good old Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, the home of Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
And Gary
Not a lot of people know that.
Creator. I know. Do you know you told me that?
Mm-hmm.
And it changed. I was like, well, shoot, I need to get to this show. Like, it was literally a conversation that we were having, and I was like, oh my gosh, I need to get to this show.
Yeah.
And it opened my whole world up. But yeah, so I primarily do the game. Both of the conventions I just named are gaming conventions. Okay. And gaming conventions are, I think, all I'm doing next year.
So
except for I've got a couple that are comic, but they have game elements to them.
And you're turning that into a game.
Yes.
And it's more of a storytelling game like Dungeons and Dragons, correct?
It is. Yeah. It is.
And I remember you were mentioning that you met
Luke Gygax. I'm sorry, Gary has passed away.
Yeah. Luke Gygax, which is Gary Gygax's son. Mm-hmm. And you're working at Dungeons and Dragons.
So I'm working on a Dungeons and Dragons adventure, and I do work with both Luke and Heidi, who's another Gygax heir. So with Luke, we actually initially met at Gary Con, and went the first time I went, and I've gone for a few years now,
Okay.
This is kind of like my model for how you do shows is find the gaps and fill them. Mm-hmm. And this was like, hey, I will work on getting a writing track into your convention. And that's sort of like I got tied into their programming team. This year, so 2024 is the 50th anniversary of D&D. And I had in 2023, summer of 2023, I'd approach him. I'm like, what if we hear some of these great stories that are part of D&D? And so with Luke as at the head of that, we started creating like an anthology of essays of, the stories of the game mm-hmm. that changed the world and the people who played them.
So before we get into that, I want to know how so that people can know how you met Luke.
Well, that's really it.
And again, that was you being yourself, by the way, from my understanding. You didn't even know who he was, right? And I'm taking over the story. Go ahead.
Well, no. I mean, I knew I knew the family. I knew Gygax was the creator. Mm-hmm. But the first time that Luke came by my booth at Gary Con, I didn't like
your Wisconsin accent came out real hard there.
Oh, did? Oh, yeah. No, I try. Oh, I try so hard not to do that. So, but yeah, he came by my booth, and he and his wife Bushra, she's amazing. And I greeted everybody at my booth, and I was like, and I knew he was associated with the con, but the first time I met him, I didn't know he was Luke Gygax, mm-hmm. and so, I was just, and I'm just being myself, like you said. I was very energetic. I'm like, I was there early. I stayed late. I literally offered to say, hey, do you guys need help cleaning up? Like, I was just, where can I feedback? And so I really was in this other author community at the time also, with that's kind of sort of led by a man named Craig Martell, who's an independent author. And here's what the piece I didn't know. I did not know that Luke Gygax and Craig Martell were good friends. And with Craig Martell, completely different organization. I was like just doing my thing. I was just doing, writing and authoring, had nothing to do with games at all.
Who is he associated with? I know he's
Craig Martell is a military sci-fi author, but he was kind of one of the founding members of something called 20 Books to 50K, okay. Which is the closest thing to a union that independent authors have. It is just like, they take care of us. They inform us. It's an incredible organization. They used to run this event out in Vegas. But similarly to the way that I'd been working with Luke, I was working with, hey, how can I help out here? Literally volunteering to check people in at their events. How do I do this thing? Learn from people, really collaborate with people. So by the time that I went, I had been that person, with that organization. And then separately was saying, hey, Luke, I used to co-write for years. I would love to help you write this story for the 50th anniversary. I didn't know that Craig and Luke knew each other. And basically, Luke wouldn't have probably worked with me without the recommendation from Craig, who was able to say, yeah, she's a good egg, work with her. And so now today what I'm doing is I'm the director of his zine, which the first issue that I do with them comes out next year, called G20. So follow him on Patreon, and that will be, then you can get that magazine. And I'm running the programming, the whole writer's track for his convention, GaryCon. And separately, I'm also working with his sister. I'm a guest at her convention, which is EggCon in the summer. So those are kind of my Gygax works. But in working in the game world, the only D&D, actual specific D&D work I've been doing has actually been with Legends of Evantris, who's a different... different gaming group. They're really
which is also huge. That's
popular YouTube following. They just reached 1 billion views on YouTube.
That's crazy,
right? They have 1.7 million followers just on YouTube, not even counting their other platforms.
What is that like working with them?
Oh, it's been an adventure. It's been an adventure to create this adventure. So the adventure that I'm a writer on is called The Crooked Moon. At the time that they
is this
ran
exclusive material?
I'm not saying anything that would be against my NDA.
God,
Trust me, every one of these are NDA agreements, so I won't be sharing anything like that. But what I will tell you is, at the time that they kickstarted their Crooked Moon adventure, it was the top earning 5e D&D adventure ever on Kickstarter. They made over $4 million on their Kickstarter. It was really amazing. So working with them has been really interesting because like I say, I have 124 books out, but while I've been working alongside the game world and in the game world for like the last 3 years, I've got, this history of what does it look like to produce a book? What are the systems and the processes? And for this group, for me, I want to work with somebody who we have a cultural fit.
Mm-hmm.
I love these guys and the girls that are on this Legends of Evantris team. They are doing it for the right reasons. They're incredibly creative people. They know, they tell great stories. And so I knew I wanted to work with them. And it took a long time before we actually were working together. But because this is their first time, they're really content creators. They're game streamers. And so this is their first time through a book process. And so it's been a little bit of, building the track while the train's in motion kind of thing, where it's like, okay, we're up against this now. What's our process for it? And so for me, I'm a really process-driven creative, system-driven producer. And so it's been interesting to see some of the different ways that they approach things, having never been book producers, but having a really great story to tell. I will say that when it's officially coming out here, the quality of the story that I am honored to be able to help tell is just really special. I have told people that, yes, it's a really great adventure. If you like to play tabletop role-playing games, if you like to play D&D and in 5e, you're going to be able to enjoy. You could literally get this one book and play D&D for the rest of your life and not touch on everything.
So what is the difference? So I get the story of the tabletop game, but then you're saying that it's actually like a story in itself, meaning it's just going to be like a book. So it's going to be a tabletop game, but then you could buy the book. And would this be also something that, let's say, the DMs need to like read to really make it? So it's that adventure,
massive book. I don't think I can tell you how long it is, but I can tell you that it's a massive book. I think you'll have to wait and see that until it comes out, because I don't want to say anything I'm not supposed to say.
Any projected date it's going to come out?
Huh?
Any projected date that it's going to come out? Can you say that?
So I probably shouldn't.
Okay. All right.
So
we're going to leave it at that.
If you follow it, you will see that it's coming, and if you were one of their Kickstarter people, you're getting those backer kick communications, so you're able to see that. I don't want to say anything that I shouldn't. But when when it comes out. So yes, it's a game book, but here's what I've told. So first of all, it's folk horror, which, by the way,
folk horror. Okay. What is that? Like farming, but
twisted horror.
Okay.
It is like, Wicker Man, Slender Man, Children of the Corn. It is like the spooky psychological horror, and it is dark. It is so dark. It has been very, like, some of the pieces, there was one that they had me writing in. There was a section that I finished writing it, and then I sent to our Discord group chat, just like somebody in the fetal position. I'm like, I finished writing this. I think I need some ice cream and my grandmother. I mean, it's like,
that's what they're known for, right?
They are
horror side or no?
They've done a little bit of everything.
Okay.
I can't wait until their next announcement because I'm super psyched about it. But yeah, they have they've done a little bit of everything.
I need to get a TV in here, Sarush, because I would love to have you pulled up their group so I could take a look at it.
Yeah,
because I'm confusing. I think I might be confusing them with another famous one.
You might be confusing them with Critical Role.
That's who I'm confusing them with. Yes.
So here's where they're different.
We don't like Critical Role.
Here's where they're different. No, we don't. That's not true. That's not true. Hey, Critical Role, I will write for you too. I can be bought.
I've actually tried to comment on a bunch of their stuff, just begging and pleading for me to come on their.
I'm sorry. I'm sure you mean that you're trying to comment on Legends of Evantris. I misheard that.
I would love to.
Evantris.
Okay. Legends of Evantris. If you will have me on, I'll do it.
Yeah. So here's the thing with the primary difference between Critical Role and Legends of Evantris. As Critical Role has gained more following and become, very pop famous, if you will. They've also brought in a lot of like celebrity names. The thing about Legends of Evantris is they are a bunch of folks who just love each other. Mm-hmm. They are family. They are the same people that were playing together when they didn't know they were going to be a big deal. Like when COVID hit, they're like, hey, we better start to stream all this stuff, mm-hmm. They're genuine. Like there's a love there, and they are family. And so when you join them around their table in a stream, or even if you're watching them play at an event, you're like, wow, they kind of exude this feeling of mm-hmm. family all around. But in their book, yes, you can play it. But what I've been telling, so I have a daughter, she has like a horror podcast. She's super into horror. Kimberly. So she's, and I've told her, I'm like, listen, I know you're not a tabletop role-playing game person. However, you can pick up this book and just read it. And that's what's different. So you can pick up this book, The Crooked Mood, and you can play it, and you will play you'll never run out of adventure. But you can also pick it up and just enjoy it as a story. And that's where I think it's like, oh my gosh, it's like next level production and creativity. And I've been just super, super honored I'm in a writing and editing role on the project. And it's just been really special to be a part of it from the creative perspective. And then from the production perspective, from the business perspective, this is their first full-length book, And so I hope that they see from me like some of the, process and whatnot that I might be able to bring to future work with them. We'll see how it unfolds. But yeah, it's been a little bit chaotic in the production process, but it's been absolutely fulfilling in the creative perspective.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So because I've been wanting to do D&D for a very long time, and I couldn't find a group to do it. But because you got into the D&D world, we had a group for a little while.
It's coming again. We're going to do it again. We're bringing it back.
I hope.
Beginning next year. I know.
I'm Schmelvin, the orc with the missing snaggletooth. Yeah. I love it because it is the storytelling, and that's like the most fun part that we created in this fake world. And that's why it's It's so much fun.
Well, and let's go beyond the storytelling. How we talked about, like, when you're an entrepreneur, when you're a business person, that storytelling is how you make connections.
Mm-hmm.
It actually goes a step further in gaming. So first of all, gaming, really good, especially in our post-COVID world where we've forgotten how to connect as human beings. This is actually connecting as human beings. But second of all, like, when you're doing an experience and you're like, oh, I'm going to roll, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw my rope up over the edge of that and I'm going to climb it. And I'm going to, when I get up to at the top of that, I'm going to roll and I'm going to fire my, scorching flames over there. And we're saying that and we're rolling the dice to see whether or not we accomplish this thing, right? Your brain is actually mapping the action. Your brain is not mapping you rolling dice. Your brain is actually mapping the story that you're telling. And it's really special.
Have you seen,
way to connect.
Have you seen there's a clip of two famous actors, and I can't remember their names, but one used to be on True Blood. She was a blonde on True Blood. And she was interviewing with the guy from Walking Dead. He was in like the first season, I believe. It was like there used to be a cop. He wasn't the main character.
I'm so good with faces,
Rick,
but I'm terrible with the names.
So
I'm like, I know you were in the thing.
True. Yeah. She's the main character.
That might be it. I think that is it.
So she's a DM for hire.
Yeah.
And she's on this podcast explaining to the other actor that, like, about Dungeons and Dragons. And he's like, yeah, I don't know if I could ever get into it. And then she's like, well, let's do it right now.
Yeah.
And she sets up a scene and he's getting into it and he's never done it. She's like, you're this archer and you're traveling alone. And all of a sudden you see like two what looks like glowing eyes in the forest. What do you do? And he goes, well, I mean, I don't know. Like, I would probably investigate. She goes, perfect. Let's do an investigation check. And they were doing it together.
Yep.
And then it's so like, once you do it, because I feel like a lot of people think it's like too nerdy. It's like, oh, I won't like it.
I think they're intimidated by the mechanics and the rules, and they don't realize that it's just, no, we're just telling stories.
Yeah. And you could do one shots. That's what it's called, right? We're already assigned a role, right?
Sometimes.
It's one story where it only should take like 3 hours, 4 hours to get through the whole thing, not this whole adventure that lasts on forever, right?
Yeah.
To get into it, but they give you instructions kind of and stuff, right? And then you're actually, I believe, I don't know, can I mention that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything that I'm creating, you can mention.
Okay, good.
We're good.
You're almost doing your own spin-off of a one shot.
I am. So I have this past year, as I was developing the world for the Broken Fault Lines to become a game, which was always the direction I wanted to go, by the way. I created an entire full system. It's its own system. Just like D&D, it has a player options book. It has like our version of a monster guide. We call it an encounter guide. We've got dice mechanics, all of that. That full system, I'm the lead developer on. It's called Dungeon Race RPG. And that's a whole system on which we can have different worlds. So the very first world of it is Earth After the Melt. It's really exciting. It's a core D6, but you still use your full polyhedral set of 7 dice. And then in that system, the contributing editor is Tiffany Rose Nickel. Now, she and I have then partnered. Tiffany Rose Nickel, she created something called 1PDD, or one-page dice dungeons. And she's the lead developer of that system, and I'm the contributing editor. So I have like a core system, and she has these one-page systems. Each one is like literally all the rules are on one 2-sided page. And then each of the adventures, which you can play in like 2 hours, are like, here's the world, here's the adventure. So it's like, it's so simple. You can just pick up and go. The lower the die, the higher the danger. So we have a D4 that she developed. We have a D10 that I developed. That's a main system. But I'm super excited about Dungeon Race RPG, which is its own core system, all new like character and player options. And I the opportunity to have worked over these past few years with Legends of Evantris, with Luke, with others, with, Rose as we're doing the 1PDD, has really like deeply informed what I want Dungeon Race RPG to look like.
So is there anything else like that with that kind of mechanics? Not mechanics, but like that one page setup?
I mean, there are so many systems out there. There are definitely going to be things that people can find. They're going to be like, I've done that before if I say that it doesn't exist. But I do think that we are bringing something different to it. So the Red Rose works. So that's, I go by Red. Tiffany goes by Rose. And together we've kind of created this parent company, Red Rose Works, where some of our gaming stuff exists, including the for hire GMing. So like we're called the Girl Power GMs together. But under Red Rose Works, our motto is have a favorite world, now you can play in it. So what makes our systems unique is that, yes, there's like each of our systems are in and of themselves unique, but it's just very, very, we're both novelists by trade who have gamed our whole lives. Like I played D&D when it was 3rd edition. I know I'm dating myself there. Back when it came out when I was in high school. So we've gamed our whole lives, but we're novelists by trade. So we're coming to it from the story first and the mechanics second.
Are you gonna is that like a trademark kind of thing? Because I feel like, again,
I own Dungeon Race RPG. She owns 1PDD, and they both fall under Red Rose Works.
Okay. Because I feel like in the industry, again, now you're coming up with an hour and 2-hour gameplay when people don't have the time for even just the one shot that can be 4 hours.
Yeah. And in our game group, our one shot is usually a 2-shot.
I know.
It's usually a 10-hour game.
Yeah, exactly.
It's great. So here's the thing, I love the 1PDD and we're both creating worlds in that. I'm the sci-fi girl, she's the fantasy girl. So together we're going to be putting out these really great books that are flip books where, one side it's all sci-fi and then you flip the book over like this way and this side would be all fantasy. So she's creating the fantasy worlds, I'm creating the sci-fi worlds, and we're going to have all of these little one-shot adventures. You could literally have a dice app on your phone, go for a car drive with your family and play a 1PDD.
You know how crazy that would be?
Create a character in Dungeon Race RPG that you can play within worlds for years.
You should make the package look like a book.
It will.
And then open it up and it's like your rooms or areas.
Yeah.
That's wild.
So Dungeon Race RPG is more of like hey, we're getting together all the time. These are my friends. We're playing a game. We're creating these longer term characters like we have in our group.
Yeah.
And then the 1PDD is let's just do one and go.
If you need an investor, I want in.
I might come after you for that.
Okay, good. Because I think that is such a unique thing that people could just buy off the shelves and just and a series, different stories.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot in there.
So the 1PDD books are coming out this year, and this year the core books. So we've been playtesting for about a year, and the core book for the Dungeon Race RPG core systems coming out. As well as at least the world book for Earth After the Melt. So basically, each of the world books, for those of you familiar with 5e and D&D, Earth After the Melt would be a Baldur's Gate. Okay. From this Earth After the Melt, you can do all sorts of adventures.
Yeah.
And that's our first sci-fi world. Our first fantasy world will be Rose's world, Limoria, which is a fantasy world. When
you did the playtesting, did you do it with people that have never played D&D at all?
I did it with some people who had never played D&D, and also everybody who's playing it has never played that system. It's got its own rules. And here's the thing. I mean, I enjoy D&D. I love our 5e group where we get to play. I know I'm going to be and continue to be writing in the 2024 rule set, which came out, which is, kind of what's after 5e. But the truth is there is 50 years of different rule sets and different history. And There are some people, we have a couple in our group who like they know all the different things. Like they know every mechanic and what adds to what and
new updates to it.
All of it. Like they know it. They know it. Here's the thing. Because of that, I think it can be really intimidating for people who've never played. And then how sad that because of that intimidation, they may not join at all.
Yeah. So and then not experience what the best part of it is.
I actually think coming up with a system that here it is, it's a new system, but you're using your polyhedral dice. You've never seen this before, and they're coming into a totally brand new thing, actually is easier.
I'm going to sound like a broken record because I just said it, but you're going to have to come back on.
I hope so.
Because there was a lot that we packed into like 1 hour basically. But I want people to know where they could find you for your, and I keep messing up, Dungeon Race
RPG.
Okay. And then where they could find your books.
Yep.
And your socials.
Yeah. So honestly, the best thing is to go to my link tree because that's going to take you to all my stuff, whether it's my Red Rose Work stuff, my books, my games, my courses, my coaching, my whatever, the way too many things I do.
And then we'll have Sarush put that in the description. Can we do? Thank you, sir.
So that's literally, it's red the color. That's what I go by. Writes books. So Red Writes Books is my link tree. So, link tree is that weird one where it's like LANKTR.ee / Red Writes Books. And that'll get you at everything.
Sweet. And then also, is there anything you want to leave with people watching? Or listening, I guess.
I guess I don't know what you're asking.
Anything. Well, it could be, we'll be talking about the storytelling, getting into D&D, struggles that you kind of went through, like anything that could be helpful to anybody watching.
Okay. I would say, honestly, just for anybody who's like any kind of an entrepreneur, if you're an artistic entrepreneur, the big thing to know is that if you are pursuing your art as a career, it is a business.